So we continue and finalize our March journey today. And we've been talking all month about the art of quantum living. And so we began our journey several weeks ago talking about Women's History Month and the idea of part of this quantum reality of seeing beyond is also shifting the way that we perceive the world and where the divine feminine falls into that. Being in the quantum, we can talk about it in many different ways, but ultimately when you really go down into the root of what we're understanding, quantum is about just seeing what is not there. We can't see the many things about our world from a scientific perspective, but we can imagine, we can trust, we can have faith. And so it's about seeing beyond what we can see, seeing beyond what we think we see and know, to be able to shift our way, to shift our sight into a new, more loving, expansive, freedom way. So we've continued our journey talking about sacred anger and the idea that sometimes anger gets a bad rap, but that anger is also part of our spiritual growth. It's part of an emotion that can show us a way to show up as the Christed being, if we understand the lesson that it has for us. Then we continued on with the following week, no one and nothing is against me, which is really the crux of this quantum living work that I do. And it's about understanding that we sometimes create these walls around our heart. We create this armor in the way that we address the world. We don't even realize it sometimes how we do that, because we've had so many experiences in our childhood or in our past that really create a guard around us. And when we do that, we're not fully experiencing life. We're not fully experiencing love, and we are not fully in our spiritual selves. And so we looked at all of these things about how do we open ourselves up. All of these talks are on Facebook and on YouTube if you want to catch up. Today, we move on to the art of forgiveness. You know, today is celebrated as the resurrection of Jesus. In Unity, we celebrate it as our own resurrection, that we come into the light, that we come into the freedom of the world. And so part of what Jesus talked about, a good part of what Jesus talked about in the Bible that we have, is the lesson of forgiveness, and how that is a crux of what it means to be a spiritual being and what it means to be free. He said, so we know, so we think from what is written in the book of Luke, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you, then your reward will be great and you will be children of the Most High. Who's ready to bless those that curse you? That's a tall order, beautifuls, is it not? But this is the challenge that our master teacher gives us. When Jesus was asked, how often should I forgive, or how do I forgive? And his famous response in Matthew was, does anyone know? 70 times 7. Can y'all do the math quick on that one? That's 490 times. That's a whole lot of forgiveness, right? This is our challenge. But we don't think about Jesus really when we think about new science or quantum living or quantum being. Really, when we distill down what quantum is, when we distill down what Jesus' teachings were about, they're really in alignment. I taught my class yesterday, The Art of Quantum Living, and we had 11 people who went on that journey, who began that journey really because it's a 21-day process. Who was there yesterday? Don't be shy. Yes. And a lot of it is about understanding how we're triggered in life, understanding how we see the world as against us, how we react to certain things, and we react in ways that we don't even understand why. We don't even understand that we're reacting. And much of it comes from the past. It comes from being hurt in the past. It comes from having protective mechanisms that you develop without even realizing it. And part of the work, when we understand triggers, when we go back underneath them, behind them, we start to learn that this work really, in the spiritual realm, is all about compassion. It's compassion for ourselves and for others. Because most of us walk the world without understanding that we have in our subconscious, in our unconscious, all of these faulty myths and messages and beliefs. Things like, I'm not okay, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe. One of the exercises that we did in class yesterday was to write down some of those messages, to drop into the heart space and be honest with what are some of the messages that motivate your life without you even realizing it. So people wrote that down, and then we got up and shared with each other what those were. And when we did the debrief, people were really shocked to understand that so many people had the same hurts, the same wounds, that thought the same things. See, we go around the world thinking that we're the only ones that live this way. We go around thinking that we're broken, that something is wrong with us, that we're not like everyone else. And we're not broken. There is brokenness in our lives, but all of us have the same human condition. We walk around with this. The important part is for us to begin acknowledging that that is in the background of our lives and animates much of what we do. These unconscious default behaviors and reactions. We see ourselves as victimized oftentimes. And much of that is motivated, again, by our own feelings of inadequacy, of powerlessness, of unworthiness. They become defensive strategies that we inhabit and exhibit. We call this, in the Q process, the shadow selves. Many of you may have heard of that or do work with other tools around that. Like, what is that shadow part of us? That part of us that we don't want to acknowledge, that part of us we may not even see, that part of us that is that scared little boy or girl that is reacting. When we react, we're really reacting to things like unfelt grief, things we've never processed, unprocessed anger, untapped feelings of rejection, unfair abandonment, and yes, even unimaginable abuse. But within that, there are unmet needs. We react that way because at the crux of it is there's a need that was not met. And then we adapt behaviors to mask that need or give us that need, albeit in a very maybe toxic way. But they're human needs that all of us have. We react and get angry or get hurt or react and get judgment, or judgy, because what we're feeling is we need connection. We felt like somebody wasn't connecting or giving us that space where we felt that. Or we felt that we didn't belong. We reacted because we didn't feel like we were part of something. We didn't belong. Or we needed affection. We get angry, but it's really the need that we want someone to be affectionate with us. Or we react because we want to feel safe. We didn't feel safe. Something in our mind said, this is not safe here, and then we react. So many different things that happen in a split second that sometimes change the way we engage and how we express ourselves and engage our spirit, or therein not. Feelings. What I want to share with you all is to understand that all of these pain points, it's so important not to stay in the pain, not to become always in the pain and talk about it, but we need to begin understanding and excavating what is behind what we do and how we think. It's said that pain not transformed is pain transmitted. Let me say that again. Pain not transformed is pain transmitted. That means if you don't do your own work, you are going to be throwing up pain on everybody and on yourself. You will not transform that pain so that you will constantly be in pain. Y'all want to be in pain? I don't. I definitely don't. Jesus, our master teacher, really shows us through the teachings this idea of how forgiveness is so much part of this being able to get behind the shadow, to acknowledge the shadow, to come forward, to be able to transform the pain. When we think about the crucifixion and we think about what has said to be his final words, at least in the book of Luke, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Can y'all imagine? We get mad at somebody for looking at us the wrong way, and be crucified, and to still have that open heart, to still have that understanding and the vision of higher law in that moment. This is the work that we are called to do. But see, Jesus is different. Jesus' forgiveness is different. And I want us to understand that it's not about turning the other cheek like we have been told that Jesus says, go ahead, just turn the other cheek. No, it's not about being a punching bag. It's not about pretending that it didn't happen. It's not about ignoring it. Aren't we good for that? Like something happens and the next day you pretend like nothing happened, right? I've been in that. Sometimes we do that. We just ignore it. But he flags it. He makes light of the wrongdoing. He's flagging that there is a wrongdoing, but he's trying to do the reconciliation around that. His acknowledgement is acknowledging the pain. He is exposing the wound. But what does he do? He pours into it. He pours into that wound of others who have wronged him. He pours in love. He pours in forgiveness. He pours in understanding. He pours in vision. He pours in kindness. He pours in patience. This is the model that we are given. Because what I'm here to tell you, take a deep breath. Forgiveness is not optional. Forgiveness is very much a part of spiritual formation, spiritual growth, living an abundant and prosperous life. If we don't forgive, we are missing a huge piece of this abundant living that Jesus brought to us to talk about. It is a necessary part of our spiritual walk. So when we feel wronged, right, it's easy to justify, like, it was them. They got something wrong with them. They're a hot mess, right? We point out there, but it's important to examine our own heart and our own motives, our own unmet needs, our own shadow beliefs, our own triggers. Are we holding on to bitterness and anger? Ooh, are we seeking revenge? Who's plotting something right now? Are we seeking revenge? Because these attitudes only hurt us, people. And so recognizing our own role in this, Recognizing the need to extend grace and forgiveness becomes so important because it saves us. We save ourselves in this. And by doing that, by opening up to this beauty of forgiveness, we offer our blessing to the world. One of my favorite books is this book, Edwin Gaines's book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, A Simple Guide to Unlimited Abundance. Who knows Reverend Edwin Gaines? Yes, thank you. Amazing teacher, so blessed she is still with us. She doesn't travel anymore. I think she's probably in her close to 90. I don't know, but she's up there. She doesn't travel, but I had the blessing of taking classes with her and hearing her on many different occasions speak at a Unity service. And for those of you who don't know, she was known in Unity and in New Thought Circle as the Queen of Prosperity, because that was all she really kind of doubled down and taught about, hence her book. And so we don't think, when we think about prosperous living, we don't think about forgiveness. But one of her 4 laws was about forgiveness. So she delves into this. And she says, our unwillingness to forgive is like stabbing ourselves with a knife and expecting the person who did us wrong to feel the pain. Who's done that? We do that. We stay stuck in the pain while maybe someone else is out having a glorious life, right? They're Netflixing and chilling, and we're stuck like in our sorrow, like stuck in all of this. They are not even thinking about us. The pain is ours. You're not doing anything really to them ultimately when you're holding on to that. And I want to share one quote on page 121 that she shares that I think is quite appropriate for this conversation. She says, we have to learn how to let go of long-harbored resentments and finally just forgive. We have to forgive our ex-spouses, who didn't live up to our expectations. How annoying it was of them to not be who we wanted them to be. We have to forgive our children. We have to forgive our parents, especially. We have to come to realize that our parents loved us the best way they knew how. See, your parents really had only one job: to get you safely onto the planet. And if they managed that for you, hey, anything else was gravy. She was known as a very funny and humorous teacher. She is known. She is. She talks about forgiving as doing emotional house cleaning. What happens when you clean your house, right? It smells good. You want to walk in, you get that fresh air coming in. Everything's tidy in order. You're making space maybe for something new that you want to buy, or getting rid of things to just clear things out, clear out the clutter. That's what forgiveness is. It's making room in your life for the good. Because when we have all that stank in us, there's no room. But we're forgiving and we're opening up that space for that light, for that love, for that joy. It's cleaning up within us. One of the practices she shares, which I think is really simple and yet powerful, she says she invites everyone at the end of the day to ask the simple question, who have I put out of my heart today? Simple, but powerful. Part of what we do when we don't forgive is we judge. We judge oftentimes. We think that we're critiquing other people, but really what we're seeing in them is a mirror that reflects us. Maybe what we wanted and couldn't have. Maybe who we were supposed to be that person is. Maybe the things in that person that remind us of our past or someone else, or maybe the things in that person that reminds us of those things that we know that we have in us that we don't want to admit. But we must begin to untangle that. And that was also, in terms of the forgiveness, Jesus' message about not judging others. Reverend Edwina Gaines tells a funny story in her book about her nana. So Reverend Edwina Gaines is from the South, I believe Alabama. And so she talks about her nana watching television every night. And there was a particular time in the country and where they were living that they were doing this big sting operation on women who were sex workers. And so every night on the news, on the nightly news, they would traipse them around in the news and show how they were locking them up and, how they were doing all this stuff to bust these women who were, bad people. So her grandmother would sit in her rocking chair, doing her tobacco and, because that's what grandmas do, right? And so she was in a rocking chair and she'd watch and say, yeah, go get them. Yeah, those evil sinners, burn them. And saying all of these horrible things, to the television night after night. Finally, Reverend Edwina said, I can't take it anymore. So she said, Nana, you know what? I do a lot of spiritual research and teaching, and there's certain spiritual traditions that say that there's a such thing as karma. And so what we judge and what we go against, we're going to end up being in our next lifetime. And her eyes got big, like, oh, shoot, I'm in for something. So the next night, they're together and they're watching television, and along comes the nightly news again with all of these things. And she just sits quietly with her, tobacco, rocking in the chair, and she just says, bless their heart. And from then on, she would say, I ain't got no rocks in my pocket. No rocks to throw, no stones to throw against others. Again, it's a funny story, but it's all about understanding the importance of where this lands for our lives. So I offer you a couple practical things to think through. And you answer the question even quickly just right now in your mind to the following statements. I am through feeling guilty about. I am over feeling sorry for myself about. I'm no longer going to blame blank for blank. I'm finished with all the sadness about. Here's a good one. I forgive my parents for. I release all of the suffering about. Above all, I forgive myself once and for all for. As I move to conclude, I want to share just quickly the story about what's called in the Bible a sinful woman forgiven. And this is a version from Luke chapter 7. As I said, most of the forgiveness begins with us. Our unforgiveness and ability to not forgive others, it really comes from our inability to forgive ourselves. In this story, Jesus is asked to dine with one of the Pharisees. And that's one of the religious leaders, right? One of the grand poobahs, right? He goes to his house, and there's this woman who's considered a quote-unquote sinner of the city. And she's learned that he's going to be at that house. And so she makes a beeline to the house, and she takes with her an alabaster jar of ointment. And so as the famous goes, she stood and she washed his feet with her tears, and she dried them with her hair. And so she's there putting the ointment on Jesus' feet. And now the Pharisee gets really upset about this and concerned and just says, you know this woman is a sinner. What are you doing? Why are you letting her touch you? And so Jesus, as always does, takes it as a time to go into a deep and profound teaching and basically just shares a story with him, which I'm not going to go into. It's a little bit long. But the bottom line is he turns to the woman, and then he turns to the Pharisee, and he says, therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. Hence, she has shown great love. But the one to whom little is forgiven, the one to whom little is forgiven loves little. Then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. But those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? But he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. I want to flag something really important here. See, we oftentimes think that it was Jesus that did the healings, that Jesus who saved the people. But if we even look at the language, clearly says, your faith has saved you. You have saved yourself. I have just shown up here and held space for you. Think about this. She was ready to forgive herself. She was ready to be able to let go of all of that shadow that she carried around, all of the messages she had received her whole life potentially about being a sinner. And she was ready to stand before Jesus and say, I forgive myself. I love myself. That is why I am here in front of you, that I have the courage to stand here in front of you and do this. This is the important part, you all, because we have to love big to forgive big. That's what they're saying here. When we can love ourselves big, we can forgive big. This is the biggest task that we have on hand, to forgive ourselves, to have compassion for ourselves when we are not in our Christed beingness or acting outwardly in that. Because let me tell you, we've been taught a whole lot of stuff, but Jesus don't give a fig about what you done. God does not give a fig about what you did or you didn't do. We don't have a universe where there's a God judging us. It is a loving God that has brought us to this iteration of life to be able to learn and to forgive ourselves, to save ourselves. And in the process, when we do that, when we let our light shine, when we open our heart, that light walks before us even before we enter the room. And by extension, we bless others. So I close by telling you, Jesus was crucified on the cross. There is no usefulness in crucifying yourselves. Get off the cross. That's Jesus's place, y'all. Get off the cross, as one of my previous ministers to say, get off the cross, we need the wood. Get off the cross, we need the wood for the burning bowl. That's mine. That's it. Today we celebrate Easter. And that means we celebrate forgiveness. We celebrate redemption. We celebrate resurrection. We celebrate the possibility, not even if you can see fully that your life can be grandiose and marvelous and miraculous. Maybe you just see that glimmer, but see it and hold on to it, because that is the truth of our lives. We have been brought here as daughters and sons and humans of the Most High to be glorified, not to be punished. Take that with you. Chew that like the grandmama Nano on her tobacco. Chew that today. Forgiveness is medicine. Give yourselves that medicine today. And so it is, and so let it be. Amen.